Let's talk about how to cope with crisis, how to cope with the overwhelm when the crisis happens, whether in your close, like in your private life, or in a broader landscape of whatever is going around you that may feel like a huge storm. And I want to start this episode by bringing up a study, a research of people dealing with extreme stress of being kidnapped. This will teach us of how some people really stood out in their way of coping with that huge stress. So two groups of people were compared. One of the groups who coped, let's call it coped, in constantly thinking their way out. They constantly were thinking what to do. They were constantly strategizing, and they were trying to really solve the situation all the time. So their thinking was going on loop and constantly rehashing all sorts of scenarios, all the time scanning for what was going on, all the time scanning for the circumstance, the changes, and observing what was going on and trying to figure out what they could do in this situation. And this might relate to how so many of us, so many Western people cope with daily situations, right? So all the time scanning, all the time trying to figure out, all the time thinking, all the time your brain is thinking, checking the news all the time, how the landscape is changing, what do I have to react to all the time. And the second group that was studied was the group of people who try to manage not the circumstance, not to control, constantly think about how to control the circumstance outside, but went into managing their emotions, so to speak. And I don't think they were conscious of what they were doing, but they were equipped with that skill, that they went inwards. They were finding ways to calm themselves. And one of the ways was they were imagining things in their minds, such as they went into imagining themselves in the safe space, in a room. They went into imagining buildings. They went so far, some of them, that they imagined the whole landscape and the whole city that they were placed in, and they could move around and exist. And that was a kind of a universe in their own minds. And there were different ways of regulating their emotions, but the essence of this study is that one of the group was oriented in what they could do about what they see here and now, them versus the perpetrators, them versus the room, the space they were in, and how they could leverage this situation. And the other group, as I summarized, they focused on inwards, and therefore they regulated their stress down. So this group of people really stood out in the research. It's important first to acknowledge what the crisis looks like in personal life and in the larger context, and how your, let's call it, biology of stress, what it makes you act like. This is crucial because you create your life based on your mood. If you are more stressed and overwhelmed, the actions you produce will be way less coherent, they will be way more chaotic, there will be less creative solutions that you can come up with. There will be all sorts of mistakes that happen that you will make if you are stressed or overwhelmed, which then will extend to how your reality looks like. If you are in a chaotic state of mind, you will produce chaotic results in the world, in your life. People don't like to be in unpredictable state. People don't cope very well when they don't know what happens next. And as we know, these last years have shown us that we have very little control in our life, in the changes that keep happening, the losses that you might have experienced, the losses in job, the losses in relationships, whether that were your choices or the choices from the outside, if someone perhaps died in your family, or if the breakup happened and you suffered a huge loss, and the losses of job, for example, or losses of money, the fact that the prices are increasing and you can afford way less at this point than you used to with the resources that you had. Other losses could be losses of identity. If perhaps you had a job that you identified with and now your role is no longer that, maybe you had to find a different job that doesn't serve you as well as it was in the past. And maybe a role in some sort of relationship, that perhaps you lost one of your parents and you identified as a daughter in this relationship. All these are really significant stressors, and all of them coming together, they add to your overwhelm. And how does that look like? Well, basically that stress that you might be feeling that impairs your way of thinking and acting. When you think at the behavioral level, how the stress looks like when it manifests, whatever you put out when you are under pressure, let's put it this way, it never is very constructive in your life. It never is very creative. We shut off those capacities in our mind that allow us to create any sort of creative results. So when you are acting out of stress or fear or survival, you might remember you become very short-tempered, right? The way you react, it may be very snappy, very short-tempered, how you react in your relationships. Maybe sometimes you regret what you did or what you said afterwards because you were acting out of stress. We act out pressure because it feels so heavy. We can't cope with this from inwards, and we have to resolve it by venting out. We accuse someone, we blame someone, we make them feel bad about them just to relieve some of that pressure. And because we act this way, people also act this way towards us. And that's why I really wanted to start by you acknowledging how you react in those situations before you blame another person for doing the same thing. We are all people, and we all have to take responsibility and take our part in creating the landscape that it is today. So the crisis on the outward level looks like, well, we're all kind of touched in one way or another by the crisis that is growing in the outside world. So the prices are rising. We are observing from the news reports all sorts of things that might be affecting us, and I will get to it shortly, because news really want to manipulate how we think and how we react. They want to keep us polarized and separated, because when you are in this hypervigilant state, when they keep telling you about all the bad things that are happening, and you might not be actually affected by them at all most of the times, But at the time of watching the news, you might be hearing all these things, and they keep blaming this group, this kind of people, this minority, and they keep showing you the evidence of how they are bad, as in to keep you glued to the TV screen or to your news app, news feed, so that you come back and watch more of them, read more of them, and feed yourself with more fear, more stress. You act out more, and because people do the same, they act out more. And we add to the state of fear, the state of separation, the state of polarization of people. Everyone turns the blame against one another. Everyone keeps pointing a finger, and it's natural with this circumstance. That's why I wanted to really speak about the news first, so that you can discern what actually affects you, what is being told that it affects you. You really have to be able to differentiate the crisis from the outside in what really is part of your life. So what can be really happening, like I started saying, the prices are going up. There could be all the losses, like I said, that affect you personally. There could be protests that maybe you observed in your town. There could be some laws that maybe start affecting you. Obviously, the control in governments are increasing because they want to keep people under tabs. They want to really control them by adding more regulations, adding more laws, maybe tightening the grip over some regulations. And some of them might be affecting you, some of them might not. And I want you to keep discerning what is really affecting you, what is just part of the white noise that being passed on us in the form of news, feed, and gossip, or people telling you, your family. So how that might all feel like is as if you're in the center of a storm. There's storm around you, there's news, there's people, there's gossip, there's actually circumstances that are affecting you, and there's more of these things. But I wanted to bring you an analogy here because I love giving a metaphor that helps people understand. It always helps me understand the situation as if that's all storm, like a hurricane. It's really big. It may feel like really overwhelming. You might find an eye in the storm that is actually so quiet and peaceful. If you know anything about a hurricane or a storm like that, you know that it's the quietest place. And that's where I'm starting to talk about how you might start coping with the amount of chaos in your life, is to find that eye of the storm inside of yourself. So it is so possible, like in the research I quoted before, people in completely nerve-wracking situation were able to find a relative amount of peace within themselves, so that they went inwards to cope and create some sort of peaceful state through their imagination, through regulating their emotions, even though they didn't do anything with the outside world. Sometimes you have to acknowledge what things you can control, what you cannot control. And these days there is more factors and more than the life that we may be used to some years in the past, where you didn't experience so much of the drama outside of you that seemed like you have to react to everything, you have to be vigilant. And there seems to be more of those things outside of you that you have no control over. So again, going inwards into the center of the storm, you are your own center, and you can grow a space of peace within yourself. You can grow it in so many different ways. Well, we have to first acknowledge that most of us are not in such stressful, extremely stressful situations as the people in the research that were kidnapped. The news and the information from the outside want to convince us otherwise. And this is also how our brain works. So it's natural that there seems to be a sense of urgency in you to deal with all these situations. You might notice that thinking about some past event, and it always helps going in a hindsight because we get some insight from looking in the past so that you can apply into now, where sometimes you get so swept into a drama or news or maybe some gossip, or some people told you about all the things, but you maybe went and slept on it, and you woke up and you were looking at the same situation completely differently. Or maybe you actually did act out in the midst of very chaotic situation, and then you looked at it, oh my God, so much mess. I added so much mess by reacting to this in this stressful way of being, from that fear, from that anxiety, from that panic state that actually added more mess to the situation, because it's really hard to change the circumstance constructively. But knowing that there is many things that we can't control, actually action is pointless, is futile. We would simply be venting out our frustration, our anxiety in the outside world, adding to other people's stress. So the only way to cope with the situation that you can't control is by going into the eye of the storm, is going into your center. There's numerous ways how you can deal with this. One of these is like in the research, you can find your place of peace inside of you. You can simply imagine a state that you go into, and it can take only sometimes, as short as 30 seconds. You can do it wherever you are. There is virtually no limitations where you can go into your peaceful place. You can create this state, as in imagine a place that you go into. How does that look like? How does it feel like? How does it sound like? And cultivate it over a period of time. Go back to it, expand it more, expand the feelings, play with it. Or you can simply cultivate that state, and maybe you can find a word that calls it out every single time, that you can really pinpoint as one word that always brings you back to this centered space. Or it can be as simple as just one deep breath. And this is something that can anchor you every single time of the day that you feel a bit overwhelmed, or you just want to become more aware of what's going on so you gain more clarity, which is what happens when you are anchored inside your center, inside your core self, in the eye of a storm. Regardless of what's going on the outside, the breath, you breathe in and you just find that calm space inside for a period of time that you breathe consciously in and out. Maybe you want to extend the out breath a little bit more. That will actually help your nervous system feel more peaceful, and finding more awareness in just being in the moment, knowing that you cannot change anything, and just by extending this moment of pause in your day more and more often, you are helping yourself with whatever you can control. Because when you are more anchored inside yourself, you are increasing that ability to react more clearly. Actually, this is called a response as opposed to reaction. And always in this moment of peace that you apply before any action, or if you decide to not act, which is often also a very good way of being, where you simply wait for how the things evolve. And within that space, within that silence, within that stillness, you want to also practice the awareness of what is going on, what is affecting me really, reflecting on how am I really feeling, observing your thoughts and not getting reactive out of them, not letting the stressed thoughts to act out, because the thoughts when you're stressed are different than when you are not stressed. Like I told you, it takes only to sleep on a problem to change a whole attitude towards whatever is going on in your life. And that shows how the calm brain, rested brain, is going to approach any situations in a completely different way. So observing how your thoughts want to hijack your attention and make you act is also very important, that you observe and analyze yourself, and maybe even become amused by, how those different states want you to act, because they do serve as self-preservation. But there are so many different ways we can resolve our situations today than how we were originally built in very primal times to deal with stressors, and how we can apply our more intentional, more aware way of being in the outside circumstances in our life, and to deal with our life way more consciously. So observe yourself, act only when you have enough peace and intention and enough clarity to act. And obviously there are exceptions that you have to do something fast, but they are so rare. They almost never happen in our daily life. We are not facing that urgent circumstances as we might think we are, as we might being told that we are dealing with so much urgency. So discern what you hear, news, maybe you want to actually destimulate from news. You might want to cut down on listening of news. You might want to cut down on when people tell you about different negative things, and ask them to refrain from doing that, and have your own way of getting the amount of news that you need. I gotta tell you, on a personal level, I don't watch any news. I hardly ever check any news feed ever. It could be once in a month that I get some top headlines scanned, and that's mostly by accident when I'm on some website or see some headlines. I do not go on news report. I do not look on news feed. I am not interested in anyone influencing my state of being, in feeding me with unnecessary amounts of information that my body would have to process, that my mind would have to process, that my energy, I would have to literally digest all of that, and it's escalating the amount of the news from what I know, because I do know what is going on. And I am specifically focused on the things I want to put my focus into. And this is what I want to encourage you to do. Focus on what you want to feed. Focus on the things that you want to grow in your life. If you focus on news, they will grow in your mind into more drama, in more hypervigilant state, in more crisis. You will want to go and consume more of that as well. If you go more into nature, if you meet more with people who are positive, who have amazing ideas of how to do great things, or meeting with maybe artists who are creating some cool art, or maybe watching some guided meditations, this will predominate your mindset. This will predominate your attention. So simply by deciding, remember, you are choosing where your attention goes. Don't blame it on the news, don't blame it on others. You get to choose. Yes, it is a little bit harder these days to navigate this. There is more people who are swept in that storm, but you are still the captain of your soul. You are still a person who manages where you put your attention. You are the decision maker of where you put your focus, to the degree that you can. Yes, you can't control every single thing, but you can control so many things where you put your focus and your attention, and therefore you will change the mood of your being. You will change what you think about a lot more during the day. You focus on the things that give you joy. You read a book that gives you joy. You watch a movie instead of news that is a comedy perhaps. Or maybe you hang out with people that are making you laugh and you just go and crack jokes with them. Or you just go and exercise with your friends on maybe in a park. And you can do all those things for completely zero money. You can do it for free and experience more and more of benefits on a daily basis when you make those tiny adjustments in your day. So this is the end of this video. If you liked and enjoyed this, let me know your ways of how you find are helpful to cope with stress. And if you want to subscribe to this channel, feel free to do this. I talk about all the things, how to navigate these crazy times internally and externally, and how to live more in flow and build more sustainable way of living that will make you more in touch with your humanity and with who you are being and who you're meant to be.